So, if you're listening to this right now, I want you to just, if you can, turn down the lights a little bit.
Oh, setting the mood right away. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to for this one. Picture the scene. It's Victorian London,
Right.
but not the polite tea-drinking version we usually see in those glossy costume dramas.
Definitely not.
This is the dead of night.
Yeah.
The fog is rolling in off the Thames, and it's thick, like thick enough to taste. The gas lamps are flickering, casting these long, jumping shadows against the wet brickwork.
It's very oppressive atmosphere.
Exactly. And we are walking in the footsteps of a man who is absolutely terrified. Not because he's being chased, but because he's realized that the world he understands, the world of law, order, reason, is beginning to crack.
That is a perfect setup for where we find ourselves today.
Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone.
Yeah, we are continuing our exploration of Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Specifically, we're unpacking just Chapter 2 today, the chapter called Search for Mr. Hyde.
And you were right to focus on that atmospheric tension right out of the gate, because this chapter is really where the genre of the whole story shifts.
How so?
Well, we move from what felt like a slightly weird mystery about a door in a wall, which we talked about last time, to a full-blown psychological thriller. It becomes about the limits of the human mind.
And our guide for this journey, our detective, essentially isn't exactly an action hero. We talked a bit about him before, but today we really have to get inside the head of Gabriel Utterson.
Yes, the lawyer.
He's a lawyer. He's dry. He's dusty.
Dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable. That's how Stevenson actually puts it.
Right. But here's the thing I want to figure out in this deep dive. Utterson is the ultimate rational man. He loves routine.
He thrives on it.
So why does this particular situation, this story from his friend Enfield about a guy trampling a child, why does it rattle him so badly?
It's a great question.
I mean, he's a lawyer in London. He must see crimes and terrible things all the time. Why does this specific one keep him up at night?
That really is the million-dollar question for this chapter. And to answer it, we have to look at what Utterson represents in the text. He isn't just a character, he's a symbol of Victorian stability.
He's status quo.
Exactly. He lives by a strict code. And in this chapter, we see that code completely assaulted by something that doesn't just break the law, it breaks the rules of reality itself. And it all starts with a piece of paper.
Right. The will. Dr. Jekyll's last will and testament.
Utterson has this document locked away in his safe, and the text tells us it's been an eyesore to him for a long time.
Which is such funny language to use for a legal document. An eyesore.
Yeah.
Like it's an ugly building blocking his view or a bad stain on a rug.
It literally offends his sensibilities. Utterson is a man who spends his Sunday nights, and this is his typical routine. He eats a quiet dinner alone, sits by the fire, and reads, get this, dry divinity.
Wait, dry divinity, like old religious sermons.
Yes, old theology texts. That is his idea of a wild Sunday night.
Yeah.
It's structured, it's highly moral, it's completely predictable. He reads, and then he goes to bed soberly and gratefully when the clock strikes 12. That is his ritual.
But on this specific night, after hearing the story about Hyde, he breaks the ritual.
He does. He doesn't read the sermons, he takes a candle, goes into his business room, opens the safe, and pulls out that will.
And this is where I need you to help me parse the legalese a bit, because the terms of this will seem, well, they just seem crazy.
They're entirely unprecedented. The will states that if Dr. Jekyll dies, all of his possessions, everything, go to his friend and benefactor, Edward Hyde.
Which is suspicious enough on its own.
Right, especially given that Utterson has never even met this Hyde guy, and now he knows him to be a violent criminal. But it's the second clause that really gets under Utterson's skin.
The disappearance clause.
Exactly. It says that in the case of Dr. Jekyll's disappearance or unexplained absence for any period exceeding 3 calendar months, Edward Hyde should step into his shoes immediately.
Immediately.
Free and clear, no questions asked.
Unexplained absence. That sounds like, I don't know, something a mobster rates before he goes into hiding. Not a highly respected London doctor.
It implies a total lack of permanence. It implies that Jekyll expects to just vanish. And to a lawyer like Utterson, someone who deals in the hard, cold certainties of death and inheritance, the very idea of a planned disappearance is chaotic.
It's messy.
It suggests a life being lived outside the sane and customary boundaries of society.
So before he heard Enfield's story about the trampling, how did Utterson even justify this will? Did he just think Jekyll was being eccentric?
He thought it was madness. He literally thought his friend had gone soft in the head. But now Now that he has a name and a face, or at least a description of a face to attach to Edward Hyde, the category shifts in his mind.
It's not madness anymore.
No, it's disgrace.
He thinks it's blackmail.
Precisely. Utterson's rational mind is desperately trying to find a logical, worldly box to put this weirdness into. He thinks, okay, Hyde must have some terrible dirt on Jekyll, maybe something from his wild youth.
Because that's a problem Utterson can actually solve.
Exactly. He's a lawyer. He can handle a blackmailer. He can manage a scandal. That's within his skill set.
But he can't manage a monster.
No, he cannot. And that underlying terror drives him out of his house that very night. He needs a second opinion. He needs to triangulate his position on Jekyll's mental state. So he goes to see the third member of their old friendship trio, Dr. Lanyon.
Now, paint a picture of Lanyon for us, because as I was reading this, in my head, if Utterson is a gray, rainy day, Lanyon feels like a blast of hot air.
That's a really great comparison. Lanyon lives in Cavendish Square, the citadel of medicine. He is described as a hearty, healthy, dapper, red-faced gentleman.
He's loud.
Very boisterous. He has this shock of prematurely white hair. He's quite theatrical. When he greets Utterson, he springs up and shakes his hand with both of his hands. He is a man of real substance, completely grounded in the physical world.
But there's this noticeable chill that enters the room as soon as Utterson brings up Dr. Jekyll. And these guys used to be inseparable. The text calls them Damon and Pythias.
The famous mythological friends, yes.
But Lanyon says he hasn't seen much of Jekyll in 10 years.
And the reason why is critical context for the whole story. It wasn't a personal falling out. They didn't fight over a woman or gambling debt. They fought over science.
Lanyon uses a very specific phrase that I absolutely love. He calls Jekyll's recent work unscientific balderdash.
Unscientific balderdash. It sounds almost comical to our modern ears, like a stuffy gentleman's insult. But in the Victorian scientific community, those are fighting words. You really have to understand the intellectual landscape here. Lanyon represents strict materialism.
Meaning what exactly in this context?
Meaning, if you can't measure it, weigh it, or dissect it on a table, it isn't science, it's nonsense. Lanyon is a traditional, rational physician. He believes purely in the physical body. Jekyll, on the other hand, became what Lanyon calls fanciful.
Fanciful.
He started venturing into the metaphysical, asking questions about the soul, about consciousness, about the dual nature of man-things that Lanyon considers strictly off-limits for a respectable man of science.
So Jekyll is basically moving from chemistry into what? Magic, alchemy.
Right. Into the transcendental. Into the idea that the physical reality we can touch isn't the only reality. And to Lanyon, that's not just bad science, it's practically heresy. It's dangerous.
So when Utterson finally asks him, hey, do you know this protege of Jekyll's named Hyde? Lanyon says absolutely not.
Right. Because if Hyde is a product of Jekyll's balderdash, Lanyon wouldn't recognize him anyway. He exists outside of Lanyon's entire worldview.
Utterson hits a total dead end. The scientific community, the rational community, has no record of Mr. Hyde. He's like a ghost in the machine.
He is.
And this leads us to what I think is one of the most cinematic, moody moments in the entire book. Utterson goes back home. He enters his dark, quiet house. He gets into bed. But he cannot sleep.
The gross darkness of the night, Stevenson calls it.
And his mind just starts to spin. He enters this awful fever dream state. The text actually says his imagination was enslaved. That is such a strong word. Enslaved.
It implies a total loss of control.
Yeah, like he's being forced to watch a movie in his head that he desperately doesn't want to see.
It's described as a scroll of lighted pictures. He sees the scene we heard about in Chapter 1, the human juggernaut crushing the little girl in the street. But then, his sleeping mind remixes it. He sees a new, terrifying scene.
Inside Jekyll's house.
Yes. He sees the bedroom of his friend. He sees Jekyll sleeping, and then a figure approaching the bed.
Plucking the curtains apart.
Yes. And demanding that Jekyll rise and do his bidding. It's a literal visualization of Utterson's blackmail theory. He imagines Hyde as this puppet master, controlling Jekyll in the dead of night. But there's one detail in this nightmare that drives Utterson absolutely crazy.
The face.
Or rather, the lack of one.
Right. In the dream, the figure has no face. Or if it does, Utterson can't quite catch it. It melts away before he can focus on it. Why is that specific detail so haunting for him?
Because you can't categorize what you can't see. Remember, Utterson is a man who needs to know exactly who and what he is dealing with. Is this a common street thug? Is it a gentleman gone wrong? Without a face, Hyde is just pure, abstract menace.
He's a blank space.
He is a variable in an equation that Utterson cannot solve. And for a lawyer, that is agonizing.
And that uncertainty blossoms into a full-blown obsession. It's not enough to just know about Hyde anymore. He has to actually see him, to put a face to the name. And this leads to that grim little pun he makes.
Oh,
If
yes.
he be Mr. Hyde, I shall be Mr. Seek.
It's a rare moment of wit from our dry lawyer, isn't it?
It really is.
But it's also a coping mechanism. By turning this terror into a wordplay, into a detective game, he's trying to regain some sense of control. He decides to start a stakeout.
Let's talk about that stakeout, because the way Stevenson describes the street at night is, well, it's incredibly lonely.
It is. Utterson stands by the by-street of shops where the door is. It's a fine, dry night. There's frost in the air. The streets are clean as a ballroom floor.
That image really strikes me, a ballroom floor. It implies everything is swept clean, open, visible. There's literally nowhere to hide.
And the silence. In a bustling city like London, absolute silence is rare. It amplifies everything. So when Utterson finally hears those footsteps approaching, they don't just sound like normal walking, they sound like an event.
Odd, light footsteps, the book says.
Yes.
He knows it's him. Even before he sees him, Utterson feels this superstitious prevision of success. He just knows.
Yeah.
And then the figure appears. Small, plainly dressed, moving very quickly across the frost.
Utterson steps out of the shadows. He touches him on the shoulder. Mr. Hyde, I think.
And the reaction is just animalistic. It's the only word I can think of for it.
It absolutely is. Hyde shrinks back with a hissing intake of the breath. Think about that specific sound, a hiss.
Like a snake.
Exactly. It's a defensive mechanism of a wild creature, not the reaction of a London gentleman. He doesn't look Utterson in the eye.
But Utterson is relentless here. He pushes. He says, "Will you let me see your face?" And Hyde hesitates. Then he turns. And he finally shows it with this air of defiance.
This is the moment of truth, the face of the monster. Utterson stares at him, analyzing him, memorizing his features. He says, "Now I shall know you again."
And Hyde's reaction to that is so strange to me. He doesn't attack. He doesn't run away, at least not immediately. Instead, he gives Utterson his address in Soho.
Which completely terrifies Utterson.
Why would giving an address be scary?
Because why would Hyde freely give his address to a lawyer? Utterson instantly thinks, oh God, he's doing it because he knows he's going to inherit the estate soon. He wants me to know where to send the inheritance money when he finally murders Jekyll.
Oh, wow. So he views it as a threat.
A very subtle, confident threat.
But then Utterson tries to play the, "oh, we have mutual friends" card. He mentions Dr. Jekyll, and Hyde just snaps.
The mask completely drops. Hyde flushes with dark anger. He calls Utterson a liar. He knows Jekyll didn't send him. And then, with a savage laugh, he unlocks the door and vanishes inside,
leaving Utterson just standing there, alone on the freezing street. But now we have to get to the core of this chapter, the description of Hyde. Because Utterson stands there, leaning against the wall, trying to figure out why he feels so physically repulsed by what he just saw.
This is arguably the most important piece of analysis in the entire chapter. Utterson lists the physical traits. He notes that Hyde is pale. He's dwarfish. He has a husky, whispering, somewhat broken voice.
But hold on. Being short and pale doesn't make someone a monster. I mean, I know plenty of short, pale people who are perfectly lovely.
Right.
But Utterson describes this overwhelming feeling of disgust, loathing, and fear. He says there is an impression of deformity without any nameable malformation. That sounds completely contradictory. How can someone be deformed but look technically normal?
That is the absolute genius of Stevenson's writing in this era. He is tapping into a very specific, very potent Victorian anxiety called atavism.
Atavism. Okay, break that down for us. What does that mean?
It's the fear of biological regression. You have to remember, Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species had been published a few decades prior to this. It fundamentally changed how humanity viewed itself. It suggested that humans evolved from animals over millions of years.
Right, the evolutionary ladder.
But the flip side of that theory, the part that kept Victorians awake at night, was terrifying. If we evolved from animals, could we slide back down the ladder?
So could we devolve? Could we become primitive again?
Exactly. When Utterson struggles to describe Hyde, he eventually uses the word troglodytic. That means a cave dweller, a primitive, prehistoric man. Utterson isn't repulsed because Hyde is just ugly in an aesthetic sense. He's repulsed because Hyde radiates this raw, unfiltered, animalistic energy that polite civilization is supposed to have buried centuries ago.
It's like looking at something that simply shouldn't exist. Like, I don't know, like seeing a dog walking upright on its hind legs and talking to you. It looks humanish, but your brain is screaming at you that the fundamental rules of nature are being broken.
Precisely. It is the uncanny valley, long before that term even existed. Utterson says he sees Satan's signature on Hyde's face, because Hyde seems to entirely lack a soul. He's a creature of pure, unbridled impulse, stripped of all the moral evolution that makes us civilized humans. Utterson feels that literal nausea because his own biology is reacting to an apex predator.
And this apex predator has a key to the back door of Dr. Jekyll's house.
Right, and here is where the physical geography of the scene becomes highly symbolic. Hyde enters through that back door, the dingy, neglected dissecting room door on the dark by street. Utterson, meanwhile, walks around the corner to the square of ancient, handsome houses. He goes to the grand front door.
He knocks, and Poole, the elderly butler, lets him in. And the contrast here is just jarring. Outside, it's cold, it's foggy, and there's a literal snake man hissing at you in the dark. Inside, it's a warm fire, costly oak cabinets, good wine. It's the pinnacle of civilization.
But Utterson can't even enjoy it. The text says there is a shudder in his blood. The memory of Hyde's face has entirely contaminated his sanctuary. He sits there looking at the warm fire, and he feels a deep nausea and distaste of life.
That is so powerful. Just the mere sight of Hyde has drained the color and the joy out of Utterson's world. So he's sitting there, and he asks Poole about the key. And Poole confirms his absolute worst fears.
He does. Poole confirms that Hyde does indeed have a key. The servants have strict orders from Jekyll to obey him. And this is the real kicker. Hyde never dines in the main house. He mostly just comes and goes by the laboratory.
So Utterson puts all these pieces together, or rather, he puts the pieces he currently has together. He falls back on his legal, rational mind. He thinks, okay, it's the ghost of some old sin.
The Jack in the Box, he calls it.
Which is such a creepy, vivid image. The Jack in the Box. He thinks Jekyll did something terrible in his youth, some wild, unacceptable indiscretion. And now, years and years later, the punishment has popped out of the box to ruin his respectable life.
He thinks Hyde is just the physical manifestation of bad karma, a ruthless blackmailer living parasitically off Jekyll's past disgrace.
And notice what Utterson does right after he comes to this conclusion. He starts checking his own conscience. He starts groping in all the corners of his memory, wondering if he has any old sins that could suddenly pop up and destroy him.
That's a fascinating psychological detail. So Hyde's sheer presence doesn't just threaten Jekyll. It makes Utterson feel inherently guilty, too. It makes him question his own core goodness.
It acts as a mirror, a very dark mirror.
Yes. But Utterson shakes it off and resolves to help his friend. He essentially gears up for a battle. He thinks, if I can just find out Hyde's secrets, his own black secrets, I can use them against him. I can force him to back off. He truly believes he can outmaneuver this blackmailer.
But the profound tragedy here, which we know as modern readers, is that Utterson is essentially bringing a knife to a gunfight. Or actually, a better way to put it is he's bringing a law book to a ghost story.
Exactly. That is perfectly stated. He is trying to apply earthly logic concepts like debt, sin, blackmail to an entity that is fundamentally illogical. He thinks he's trying to solve a standard crime, but he's actually witnessing a total metaphysical collapse.
So where does that leave us at the very end of Chapter 2? We've met the monster, we've seen the fear.
We leave with Utterson in a state of profound, lingering unease. He has searched for Mr. Hyde and he has found him, but the finding hasn't solved a single thing. In fact, it has made the world a much darker, much more dangerous place. He knows now that the threat isn't just a rumor, it's real, it's physical, and it has free access to his best friend's home.
And he also subconsciously knows that reason, law, and dry divinity might not be enough to stop it.
Indeed.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with something to chew on. Something that maybe isn't explicitly spelled out in the text, but is staring us right in the face in the shadows.
Go for it. Let's hear it.
We've spent this whole time talking about Utterson being the rational man, the man who vehemently denies the supernatural. But think about his intense, visceral reaction to Hyde. The shuddering blood, the nausea, the superstitious prevision.
Okay, yes.
Is it possible that Utterson actually does know what Hyde is, deep down, in his gut? Is it possible that this whole elaborate theory about blackmail is actually just a desperate lie he's telling himself?
Oh, that is a chilling thought. You're suggesting that he clings to the blackmail theory not because it makes the most sense, but because the alternative is simply too terrifying to look at.
Exactly. He's desperate to look away from the truth. Because if Hyde isn't a blackmailer, if Hyde is something else entirely worth, then the rules of the world are permanently broken. And for a man of the law like Utterson, that is a fate far worse than death.
It's the ultimate act of denial, and as we'll see in future chapters, that denial can only hold the darkness back for so long.
a desperate attempt to look away. Well, tonight, when you turn out the lights, try not to look too closely at the shadows in the corner of your room. You never really know who or what might be looking back. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you in the fog next time.